So those of you who know me in the audience are probably wondering, how in the heck am I going to deliver a speech that is supposed to make you feel good about yourselves? Now, growing up in Palo Alto, it became immediately obvious to me that I was something special, but not for who I was or for anything that I did, but simply because I was born in Palo Alto. I was acutely aware of the vast amounts of poverty, death, and disease that exist everywhere except for here. In Palo Alto, we are surrounded by a land of wealth, opulence, luxury, and opportunity. And to me, it is impossible to use this opportunity to do anything except to devote my life to the service of others. To do anything less than the complete dedication of my life would be a moral failing in my responsibility as a human being. And so to this end, I started studying problems like economics, foreign policy, politics, education, and healthcare, until I ran across a video by this guy, Hank Green. And his video on climate change, to say it was life-changing would be a bit of an understatement. The implications of unmitigated global warming were, to me, truly terrifying. The prospects outlined in this video are nothing less than the failure to act on the issue of climate change would ultimately mean the destruction of human civilization in the long term. That is why climate change, I believe, is ultimately an American legacy. And in this speech, I will be talking about what it is, what are the challenges, and why we should really, really begin to worry. Now, the impacts of climate change are pretty well known by climate scientists, except for the amount of change that starts to happen after we reach 2 degrees Celsius of warming above pre-industrial levels. And because of the natural uncertainty in the warming beyond 2 degrees Celsius, what scientists have proposed is that we must keep warming below this benchmark. And this type of warming, which is becoming increasingly inevitable, is largely a type of warming that we do not want to see, and the impacts are fairly well known in this regard. Deserts will begin to expand, farmland will be lost, droughts will become far more frequent and far more severe, famines will devastate large swaths of the world. The drought that devastated the Somali population 3 years ago and forced 10 million people to flee their homes and killed hundreds of thousands of people is a harbinger of what is to come. The conditions that spawned this drought are being replicated worldwide due to unmitigated climate change. Ultimately, the more urgent problem, however, is, of course, water shortage. By the time I am barely 30, half of the world's population will live in areas of water insecurity. The changing and diminishing availability of resources will ultimately cause more civil wars, more border conflicts, particularly in the unstable Middle East and Pakistan. But now for the good news, what little good news there is. What ultimately we must recognize as a nation is that the United States bears the largest single responsibility of any nation to solve this issue. Not only have we contributed the most out of any other nation to carbon emissions in the atmosphere, but we are also in a unique position to do something about it. We are the second largest annual emitter of carbon, and yet of the 3 largest emitters, us, China, and India, we are the only one in a sufficient economic and political situation to do anything about it. China and India must concentrate on delivering vast amounts of economic growth to their people, and to do so requires investment in carbon-intensive fossil fuel industries. The United States is really the only country in the world with the political, diplomatic, and economic resources necessary to invest in renewable energies. And Americans tend to recognize this. 83% of Americans believe that we must take responsibility for our carbon emissions, even if it means economic costs. 65% agree that we need to hold corporations accountable for the carbon that they emit, and 64% support eliminating fossil fuel subsidies, a majority of both Republicans and Democrats. And this is according to a recent survey conducted in December by the Yale Climate Change Communication Project. The political challenges, by some more cynical than I, are roughly boiled down to the fact that fossil fuel interests and political radicalism have taken over the United States Congress. And Americans largely embody this idea. What I mean by that is simply stated that fossil fuel interests and political radicalism have paralyzed the political process in Congress to the point where not only is severe and dramatic change that is necessary impossible, but so too is incremental change. Simply stated, the two parties, Republicans and Democrats, are no longer able to compromise on crucial issues because of radicals that exist in both parties. The fact that we must recognize as a people, however, is that the fault of inaction on climate change does not lie within Congress alone. While there is little debate, little discussion within Congress about taking action on climate change, the crucial fact is that Americans are even less supportive of it. According to the same survey that found that 83% believe that we need to take action on climate change, roughly 40% of Americans actually believe that we need to take political steps to do so. Fewer than 40% believe that we must lobby Congress through letters and through petitions to force Congress to take the action necessary to stop climate change. And it is this distrust of Congress that has proved so paralyzing of the political system. While certainly certain fossil fuel interests may be able to lend campaigns money that they need to win elections, it is ultimately up to the American people to deliver the votes that politicians need to win elections. And this all gets back to what needs to happen politically within the United States and across the world. Ultimately, in abstract terms, we must internationally double the amount of money that is annually invested on renewable industries by 2020. We must also abandon all new exploration of fossil fuel reserves and furthermore cut 80% of all existing fossil fuel reserves. To do so would be an outstanding blow to the fossil fuel industry, and this perhaps represents the biggest political challenge that the United States has ever faced. And with so much at stake, and with so much still to be done, the fact that there's no political focus on this issue has never been more of a problem. And failure is not an option. A new United Nations study gives the world 15 years to solve this issue by implementing dramatic and irreversible cuts to carbon emissions. It is ultimately up to my generation, up to our generation, to solve this issue. Future generations will be ill-equipped and unprepared to deal with the catastrophic effects of climate change if we do not act. Ultimately, what this means is that we must utilize new technologies, we must implement new policies, and we must develop new leadership if anything is to be done. In the eyes of future generations, the failure to do such a thing would be catastrophic to their lifestyle. If we do not use the tools at our disposal, then nothing else that we do as a generation matters. But if we do use these tools at our disposal, then nothing else we do matters. Thank you.